I've been replaying through Spider-Man Miles Morales, kind of leading up to the release of Marvel's Spider-Man 2. I suppose that'll date this video a little bit, but I wanted to take a very brief look retrospectively at Miles in terms of the game, because, I've really been enjoying my time replaying this game. Going back to the game, it's really interesting to look at some of its greatest strengths and some of the things it actually does even better than Peter's game in the original Marvel's Spider-Man. So before we hop into it further, if you enjoyed today's video, please be sure to leave a like and subscribe. I am also going to be playing through Marvel's Spider-Man 2 over on my Let's Play channel, Degenerate Plays. The link to that is in the description down below. I don't have the game yet. I'm not one of those YouTubers who gets things months early. So, that's going to be over on that channel, I believe starting on Saturday, the day after the game comes out. If you're interested, we'd love to have you over there, but let's hop further into the video, because one of my favorite things about Miles Morales, and it's really the focus of this video, is the idea of quality over quantity. Nowadays, and this is something we've talked about on this channel before, every game wants to be Skyrim. Every game wants to be World of Warcraft or Final Fantasy. They just want to be big and expansive. That works for a lot of games. That works for Skyrim. That works for a Final Fantasy title. That works for The Witcher, right? That works for these big games that are designed to be that way. But something I've noticed as we move further and further into video game development is that for some reason there's this expectation with AAA games that they have to be a massive time sink. They have to be 50 hours plus, otherwise they're not worth the money. And I don't really understand it. Length does not make a game good. It also doesn't make it bad. Like I said, there are games that do a fantastic job of being extremely long. A series we're going to take a look at in the near future, which is actually getting another new game, is Star Ocean. That's a series that I think the games are very expansive, but they're designed to be, and it wasn't forced. It works in places like that. But when it comes to superhero games, or honestly a lot of games, it's often better to kind of cut out some of that stuff, to cut through some of the length and actually prioritize the depth of the world, the depth of the combat mechanics, getting players to actually engage with the map, instead of just littering it with things. This is a problem we've seen with even the Assassin's Creed series. It's overwhelming to a lot of people, especially with those RPG titles in Assassin's Creed or games like Assassin's Creed Unity before it, when you just shotgun the map with 1,000 different things to do, a billion collectibles. What can happen is that you can lose this thing called intentionality. You can lose this thing where you are actually aiming in terms of creating a unique and interesting world to, make something that people want to engage with, not just something they can engage with. And this is probably the biggest strength for me with Miles Morales, is that it does this. It doesn't really try to just pepper the map with a billion different things. In fact, in the few instances it does, I think it overdid it a little bit. Things like the caches for the underground. There's like 35 of them in the game. It's not bad, but they're not exactly super engaging. But then you get to collectibles like the mementos and time capsules for Miles with his friendship with Finn. Or you get to different things like the side missions, where now they're a little bit more curated than in Marvel's Spider-Man. Now you're using the Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man app in order to actually build up Miles's reputation as a hero. And so this game operates a little bit more, not linear, but a little bit more focused than its predecessor. And that's something that I think is done extremely well that I wish more games would try and do. There's nothing wrong with making your game a huge experience. It can be the biggest open world experience of all time, super in-depth, crazy levels of exploration and hours you can sink into the game. Elden Ring is an example of this. It's an example of a game that I think does a really good job of being massive without losing a lot of its intentionality. But I think that there's always this issue with superhero games about trying to take up time. We actually even saw that with the, I would say, hype up to the release of Marvel's Spider-Man 2, where I actually made a video talking about its length and talking about how people were kind of criticizing it ahead of time, saying, oh, 30 hours is too short. And for me, I look at that and I think, okay, well, 30 hours is like 4 different work days all combined, like sitting at a cubicle for 8 hours a day, just playing Miles Morales. So I'm looking at that and I'm thinking, okay, well, I think that expectation's unrealistic. And so then when I went back to Miles and I started playing it, and I started doing some of these side missions, like for example, saving Spider-Man the cat, which I thought was really fun, where you're interacting with the world in a unique way. You try and track down this cat who went missing from Teo's bodega, and then you actually find the cat, and the thugs are even interacting with the cat. Like one of the thugs took the cat during the robbery because he thought it was cute, and you kind of get to see that character building. Some of that stuff is lost in games like The Amazing Spider-Man 2 from Activision. That's a previous Spider-Man game that gets a lot of hate, but one thing that it certainly deserves it for is the fact that it doesn't have a lot of intentionality with its missions. A lot of the side missions just feel random. A lot of the random crimes just feel like they're a detour out of your way and they're not interacting with the world in any kind of fluidity. You're just kind of doing stuff to do it because it's there. I haven't really felt that way with Miles at all again while playing this game, and even the character interactions I think are done superbly. You know, there are certainly criticisms to be had about the game, but the way that Miles interacts with everyone while going through an origin story, I think is done very, very well. I think that there was definitely a temptation here as well with different characters to fall into stereotypes. Like for example, Genki, he's kind of the guy in the chair, as the MCU makes a joke about when it comes to Ned. You know, like the guy who stays back and he's kind of watching and helping over the radio, basically doing an Alfred role from Batman. So I think that there was probably a lot of temptation when making a character like this and the dialogue for him to say, okay, well, we need to have this character show up all the time. We need to have this character talk to Miles all the time. But something I really like that this game does is the two do interact, but they interact in a way that actually builds up each character and shows you why they're best friends. When something bad happens to Miles, Genki calls him and asks him, you know, are you okay? Do you need to talk about it? That kind of thing, because they're actually really good friends. And it's just another example of trying to cull through unnecessary dialogue and actually build up the human element of Miles Morales as a character and as a game, because this is pretty much an origin story. We already got the spider bite, but this is how Miles goes from a trainee to a full-on superhero. And so with a game like that, you know, you could definitely make it 70 hours long, and I'm sure that there's a narrative in there that you could do. But something I noticed with the original Marvel Spider-Man game is that it did a lot of trying to incorporate so many villains in that some don't actually matter that much to the story. And now, before people get their pitchforks out, I have video after video about how much I love that game. But it's hard to actually sit there and defend the story inclusion of someone like Electro. You know, he doesn't actually play into the story that much. He's kind of just there to do what he's told. He's kind of just there to be a boss fight a couple times, and that's about it. You know, same thing with a character like Rhino. Really interesting character, he's fun, but there's not a lot of intentionality to his inclusion. He's really just included in the original so that he can join up with the Sinister Six and actually stand against Spider-Man, really just offering, I would say, strength behind Ock and other characters. You know, there's a lot of villains that you can kind of dissect and say, why is this character here? What purpose do they actually serve other than to be here with the original Marvel Spider-Man? With Miles, I didn't really feel that way at all. There's very few characters that it feels like you could pull out of the game and just chuck in the trash bin that wouldn't massively affect the narrative or at least hurt the world building and intentionality and design of the game. I also really love how instead of being like, hey, we need to do 500 different combat animations and really make this crazy and go insane with the swinging and like really overdo it, what they did was they said, okay, well, what would Miles be doing here? Oh, he's less experienced than Peter. You know, maybe sometimes he would kick an enemy and he'd almost fall on his ass. Oh, maybe he would be learning how to use his powers as he goes because he's not an expert. Oh, well, you know, Peter focuses on gadgets. Miles is super intelligent, but he's a lot younger. You know, he's in training. So instead of being like, well, Peter had, I'm just gonna throw a number out there because I didn't count before doing this, 12 gadgets, how about Miles has 32? Instead of doing something stupid like that, they said, well, let's scale it actually back a little bit. Miles is younger, he's in training. Maybe he has 4 or 5 gadgets. Okay, well now how do we make this work so his gameplay is unique from Peter's? Well, those gadgets are not all the same as Peter's. They're different, you know? And also, when looking at his powers, they're not all the same as Peter's too. This game did such a good job of addressing one of my main complaints of the original Marvel Spider-Man, which is the stealth. The stealth is okay in the original Spider-Man, I think it's fun, but there's a lot of instances where once you get detected, the game just wants to become a, punch-out simulator where you just get in a massive combat encounter and then you fight through that for 4 waves and then you're done. Miles does a much better job when you actually get caught, that you can just, use your camouflage, you can become invisible, and then you can go back to stealth. I really enjoy that about Miles Morales. Yes, I'm sure it makes it easier in some ways, but it's actually really unique because it lets you prioritize what type of gameplay you want to interact with in the game. There's absolutely going to be situations where you are pretty much pigeonholed into doing combat. There's really no point to try and stealth a boss, for example, or, certain wave-based encounters. But there's a lot of times where you can decide, okay, well, am I just going to jump into the middle of the room and fight these dozen guys and take them out? Or am I going to go around and pick them off a little bit? And I actually really like that about Miles Morales because it, again, does something that a lot of games miss, which is options. There's so many games that are massive, open world, huge experiences that don't actually have very many options for how you engage with the game. They're open world, but the gameplay is more linear. Something great about Miles is that it does a good job of giving you sort of a repertoire of options at your disposal of, well, do I want to, go around and sneak and pick them off? Do I want to chuck in a couple of gravity wells and then jump in there? Do I want to just get in there and use venom abilities? And that's another thing too, the venom abilities. Instead of just, making up a bunch of random moves for Miles, they said, okay, well, he has bioelectricity in the comics. How do we actually incorporate that? And here's how we do it. And that's sort of his gimmick, bioelectricity and being able to go invisible. And I think they did such a good job with this, differentiating him from Peter, but still making it very clearly a Spider-Man game at its heart. I didn't really expect to be so impressed replaying through this game again. I know the whole story, so going into it, I'm playing it with Jill because she never actually played through the whole game, and the new one is coming out. I was kind of thinking, oh well, this is another game I have to kind of get through. I've already played this game before. I loved it, but I don't really know what else it's gonna do to wow me, because it hasn't been that long. And then going back to it, I've been wowed over and over again since starting. I love the idea of kind of cutting through the BS and trying to make a more focused experience. I wish more games would be willing to do this. I wish more players would be receptive of this idea instead of just criticizing it and saying, it's not big enough. Because you know what? As the ladies have always told Nate, it's not about the size, it's about how you use it. So I'm interested to hear your thoughts down below. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to leave a like and subscribe for more content playing through Spider-Man 2 on Degenerate Plays. The link to that channel is in the description down below. I hope you will join us there. We're also currently playing through Elden Ring and Final Fantasy VII Ever Crisis as well. So there's a lot of fun stuff over there, and we have some great videos coming up as well on Metal Gear, Final Fantasy, Spider-Man, Batman, Marvel, DC, some Dark Souls stuff coming up, I believe, as well. There's a lot of things we're going to be doing on this channel, so I look forward to you joining us for the ride. Have a fantastic day, and as always, everyone, stay shway.